Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Bill Williams, and I'm here with the Global Summits, the Podinar series that was started last week, the 2021 series. And I'm here with a good friend, Dr. Lee Osler. And we have an outstanding program for you today. Going to learn a lot about redox biochemistry, one of my favorite subjects. And I'm really glad to have the world's expert dentist in that subject with us today. So let me begin with a little housekeeping so that we can get started. I want to go here to the slides, and I want to talk about what we're doing today. So we're going to be talking with Dr. Lee Osler, and we're talking about right now, as housekeeping, the Doctor to Doctor World's Top 100 group. And if you're on this Podinar, you probably are aware that the speakers are all nominated for World's Top 100 Doctors group. And we have a new group every year. And so if you want to be a part of that, then there's a nomination process that you can do that, or you can have somebody nominate you. The nomination looks like this. You fill it out, it takes about 5 minutes, send it in, and you'll be nominated, and you'll be notified if you're one of the ones who are accepted as the world's top 100 doctor group. We are looking for doctors in the medical, chiropractic, optometry, pharmacy, physical therapy, etc. And we have a lot of dentists in the group because we started off with dentists, but we don't have a lot of the others yet. So if you want to nominate someone, you may do it. Once you become accepted, then you can book a Podinar as a speaker, and you can, with special criteria, you can become a host. So Dr. Kiana Shaw will send you information about those things. If you're nominated, if you're chosen, and if you become a speaker. You can only speak one time, so just be aware of that. One thing we want to make everyone aware of that's in the Doctor to Doctor program is the platform of the future. It's called Ocademy, a teaching platform that is going to be rolled out this summer. And we want everyone to know that this is going to be revolutionary. Dr. Kiana Shaw and I met with the founder, Dr. Shaw and I went to Orlando, met with Ash Mufarth, and met with the OnPassive founder, and set up a plan for all doctor to doctor teaching to go forward on OnPassive Ocademy teaching platform. So we want to encourage you to write down this URL. It's called trimurl.co/global summits. Spell it with a capital G and a capital S, Global Summits. And if you do that, you will be placed in line to receive information, and you'll be in Dr. Shaw's group along with my group. And it will be important that you have this in the future. When you go in, you'll be looking at something that talks about advanced automation and the latest technology using artificial intelligence. And we're going to be using artificial intelligence to help us teach around the world. The global educational platform that we have here. Cost effective is the reason we're using it. It's very cost effective. It's very inexpensive, but very full featured. So become a founder now, and that will happen before the summertime, and you'll be very glad you did. Again, write down trimurl.co/global summits. With that, we're going to move right to our speaker, Dr. Lee Osler. I want to give you a short bio on Lee. His bio is very long, but what I think is important is that he's my buddy. You know, we've been hanging around for over 30 years together doing things in dentistry. Back in the old days, we call them the old days, we were in a study club together and we met twice a year for over 10 years. And I saw Lee as a young dentist, like 5 years out of school. He already had 2 practices and he was rolling. And we honed each other's skills. Iron sharpens iron, as they say. And he taught me, I taught him, and I watched him go through an amazing metamorphosis. And he became an instructor in LVI. He became a founder and a president, past president of the American Academy of Oral Systemic Health, on the board of directors for that group for many years. And most recently, he's been involved with Redox Dentistry, putting together the redoxdentistry.com website. And we'll be talking about the book he's writing, Redox Matters, today. So without further ado, I want to present a dentist from Richland, Washington, Dr. Lee Osler. Lee, I'm going to let you take on the screen and have at it.
I thank you for that great introduction. It's a great honor to be here with you, all from around the world. Those who are tuning in, I appreciate your being here with us. I have great memories going back many years with Bill, and those were fond memories of teaching together and learning together. It seems like there's no end to what we learn. And tonight we're going to discuss a facet of science that applies to many, many different disciplines in our health, oral health, as well as the whole systemic thing. As Dr. Bill mentioned, I've been intimately involved with the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health and spent 10, 15 years in that arena, trying to sharpen the saw and get the science figured out and out there so that we could help everybody in all professions and all populations understand that there is a connection between the mouth and the body that matters. And so tonight we're going to dive into something that's been a recent discovery of myself, but actually I, in studying it, realized that it goes way back. There just is a great foundation for this science that affects, again, all professions and all body parts. As Bill mentioned, I am in the process of finishing up a book titled Redox Matters, Connecting the Dots Between Redox Biology and Health. Anticipate this will be out on Amazon probably somewhere mid-summer. And so you can look forward to that, and we'll mention a few of the things that come out of this book and much of the research that has been gone into writing this book. It's about 250 pages with about 270 citations just to start with. So we look forward to having it out to help put some legs and a foundation under this new topic in healthcare called redox. And tonight we're going to talk about mitochondria and the healing power of redox health. But to start, I want to tell you how I got into it. This is a picture of my wife. Her name is Stephanie. And the red dress picture was 1987. It was just after we began practicing. And that was 30 some odd years ago, as of this date. I don't have a date on the other picture, but she, unbeknownst to us, as you go back and look at these pictures, you realize that there was something growing in her brain called a tumor, and we didn't know it at this time. We just know she began having off symptoms and was sick more and more and more. And fast forward 31 years, this was April of 2018, and this is a picture of her just kind of taken on an average day for her. She was very sick for increasingly so over these 30 years with multiple surgeries and multiple doctor's visits all over the Northwest in the United States, visiting the top physicians and institutions and institutes. And in October or thereabouts in 2018, we were visiting with on a regular doctor's visit with her physician, Dr. Len, a very wonderful man, extremely knowledgeable. He gets all the hard cases in our community, and we had been referred to him. And I mentioned to him that, it just seems that we were plateauing. She was languishing, and like, what else can we be doing here? What should we be thinking of? He made a comment to me. He says, I think you need to get her on some redox signaling molecules. I asked him what that was, and his response was, well, just go online and look for it, Google it, and get some. That was the end of the discussion. And because of my respect for him, I found a source. This is an online, it turns out it's a networking company. And not knowing anything but his recommendation, we ordered some. And she began taking it. And within probably about 48 hours, it was like she just came alive. And so that was, we began doing that on October 25th, 2018. 3 weeks later, on November 15th, this was a picture of her, and she just began to improve rapidly. It was very head-turning, jaw-dropping, amazing. It really got my attention. And then about 2 weeks later, she was feeling well enough that we went on a date, and we went to the movies and watched a movie. And I remember looking over at her, and that's why I took this picture. And I thought, man, this is different. You know, this is a different woman, a different person than where we've been over the last 3 decades. And that's really what caused me to dive into asking the question, well, what is redox? You know, what is this all about? I remember learning about something about redox or reduction oxidation in biochemistry and in my undergraduate and professional education, but I really began studying it. And one of the things that kind of bothered me the most was why I didn't already know about it, and maybe how Dr. Lin, you know, knew about it before me or something. And so we're going to talk tonight about what redox is, and really the question about this is, what are redox signaling molecules? How do they work? And how do they make the body healthy? That's really the theme of this discussion. The answer of how signaling molecules work is through this process called redox. So we're going to take a few minutes and we're going to dive into some of the base science to understand the foundations. Everybody on this program now, or who will watch it later, obviously has heard about this, because you had to have learned about this in your undergraduate and graduate education. So redox is simply reduction oxidation. This is basically the movement or the transfer of electrons from one molecule or atom to another. You have to think this through, and the definition here is that reductants are those who have an electron to spare that will donate or give it to an oxidized molecule, which is the oxidant or oxidizing agent. And when it receives that electron, it now becomes more stable or neutral or naturally compatible. And the atom or molecule that gave up the electron now itself becomes oxidized. That's basically the essence of redox reactions. They're all through life, in all the, the plant, the animal, and the human kingdoms here. And when we lose electrons, what's left over becomes more positively charged because of the positive proton in the middle of the atom. And what receives the electron becomes more negative, if not neutral. And so that's the basic idea of what a redox or reduction oxidation reaction is. It is on this pathway of electron movement that energy is created. And so we could also speak of this as redox energy, which we will talk about in just a few moments. We've all had very familiar interactions with this biochemical and organic and inorganic principle. We see metal that rusts. We cut potatoes or apples or fruit, bananas, and leave them exposed to oxygen, and they will start to brown in short order. And that is the effect of the oxidation that is affecting this, the apple or the potato or the metal object laid out in the driveway or whatever. We know how to fix this for fruit, at least. We want to supply citric acid or ascorbic acid in the form of limes or lemon juice or any kind of powder. We mix that in there, and it keeps the fruit nice and reduced, and that doesn't brown or oxidize. We commonly see this in everyday life, but it also affects us in our bodies. We call it oxidative stress in our body, and it comes from the reactive oxygen species that are created in that process of redox reactions. We see these show up, or the effects of this oxidative stress, in the areas of aging and all sorts of neurodegenerative diseases, inflammatory diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and so on and so forth. And it all has to do with this delicate balance between oxidants and reductants. For quite a number of decades now, the health community and the wellness community have focused on supplying a source of antioxidants to the body in the form of vitamins, in the form of good nutrition, where we take in phytochemicals and bioflavonoids, polyphenols from the plant kingdom. These are exogenous, meaning they come from outside the body. And we've built an entire industry within health and wellness to combat the effects of this oxidation that happens in our bodies. And largely the purpose of all of this is to keep the balance. It's a functional balance. It doesn't have to be a 1-to-1 ratio with one oxidant per one reductant molecule, but it's a functional and a very responsive balance, whereas endogenously, inside or intracellularly, the body knows how to respond to that. When this becomes out of balance, then we have what's called oxidative stress. When I'm in balance, we have homeostasis. When I'm out of balance, we have oxidative stress. If we back up a little bit and say, well, where did this all start? This is all about energy. And ultimately, that starts with sunshine. The sunshine in the soil in the plant kingdom cooperates with a process called photosynthesis in the chloroplasts of the cells inside plants in the plant kingdom. And using carbon dioxide, they breathe in the carbon dioxide and use nutrients from the soil to produce their own cellular structures, the plant structures, the stems and the roots, the tubers, the flowers, the stems, and so forth. And within those are the stored energy that comes from ultimately the photons from the sun. So they create these sugars. There's also fats. The animals are eating these plants and they make fats, as well as there are fats within these plants as well. And we come along now in the bottom part and we use mitochondria to take the sugars and the fats in the presence of oxygen through a process called glycolysis or fatty acid beta oxidation. We just call it metabolism. It runs that through a process of Krebs cycle in the mitochondria to create ATP, which is the cellular energy that we use to power our bodies. All mammals use that. The byproduct of that are called reactive oxygen species, which are the oxidants that come off this process of cellular respiration happening in the mitochondria. And of course, that releases carbon dioxide, which cycles back in and is used by the plants. And this is just the cycle of life, the bioenergetics, and all of this, everything you see here is the science of redox. It's the reduction, oxidation, the movement of electrons. As we dive just a little bit deeper into that, this is looking at the cellular respiration in the mitochondria. And there's the food and the source and the oxygen that comes in. And at a high level, through the process of glycolysis, we are preparing molecules that the electron transport chain can metabolize and in Krebs cycle. And with the use of reductants, reducing oxidized molecules over and over and over in the electron transport chain, we're again generating this ATP energy and these reactive oxygen species. To look at it just a little more closely from a biochemical point of view, again, you have the glucose and the fatty acid sources at the top. You'll notice that fatty acids are largely stored in the triglyceride deposits, the fat deposits of the body. And that's kind of a dynamic relationship. When they're in the triglycerides, they're fatty acids. When they're released in the circulation, they become free fatty acids. But inside the mitochondria, glucose is processed through the glycolysis process. Excess glucose is stored in the form of glycogen in the liver and in muscles. And through the process of glycolysis, it is fed into Krebs cycle, into the tricyclic, the citric acid cycle, or the electron transport chain. And fatty acids come in and are beta oxidized and enter into that same electron transport chain. You'll notice that fatty acids yield 9 calories of energy per gram, and glucose yields 5 calories per gram. And so the burning of fatty acids is much more energy efficient and much more energy effective. And this is one of the reasons why, for example, cardiomyocytes, heart muscle cells, really do have the predilection. Their primary fuel source are fatty acids rather than glucose. Even deeper into this, another layer into Krebs cycle, you'll just see this is a very busy, almost nauseous biochemistry illustration of the many reactions that are going on in Krebs cycle. Anybody in healthcare has been educated on this. We all wish that we could forget about it, but it really is the basis of redox, because this is where those reductants and oxidants meet together and produce that ATP, as well as the reactive oxygen species that are coming off. In summary, again, glucose, fatty acids enter the electron transport chain through their various means to produce the ATP energy and yielding the reactive oxygen species, which is what our focus is going to be on here. It's the effect of that NADH. These are reductants in that process. And as those electrons get moved with oxygen and oxygen derivatives being the ultimate electron acceptors, is where the energy is created. However, the byproduct of this are reactive oxygen species. There's probably between 1 and 5% inefficiency in the mitochondria. And sometimes these oxygenated molecules that are created are very unstable. We call them free radicals, and they have an effect in the cell to damage the cell, both structurally in all of its structural proteins as well as functionally. And this is what leads to that concept that we just spoke about health and the effect that it has on all these different body systems. As the cells become damaged, they become dysfunctional, and therefore the metabolic processes inherent in the cell, as well as some of the structural formations of these cells as they form tissues and ultimately our body become damaged. And again, this is where the whole antioxidant, or what we can do to oppose that, comes in. This concept has led to the understanding of what's the difference between health span and lifespan. And these are the numbers in the United States, at least, for what's estimated to be the lifespan of people and the health span. Health span is the number of years in good health. Obviously, lifespan is just binary. It's you're either dead or you're alive. And so at age 79, the average person collapses in the form of death, and it's over. And the question is, how many of those years was spent healthy, or how many years was spent needing to be propped up and maintained with drugs and surgeries and the marvels of modern medicine? But ultimately, this is all a consequence of this oxidative stress, or the inflammation that it produces in the body. So this brings up some questions. The questions of what is cellular health? How does a cell know it is under stress? Our cells are not intuitively brainy. They don't have a brain to figure things out or to deduce. They have to know because of some change in biochemistry or electrical gradient and what that would signal or put in order. How does it know to do something about it? What is its response? And what is that response? Those are really important questions. And they bring up this idea of what is cellular communication. Everything in the body happens. In fact, nothing in the body happens without first there being a signal, without some form of cellular communication that involves the movement of an electron from one molecule to another one. A really simple metaphor to use to think about this, and then we'll get into some more of the specific answers to those questions. Normal healthy cells that are in oxidative balance, they're homeostasis neutral, they still have a little bit of smoke or dust, shall we say, just like a home with a fireplace or a furnace, is going to burn some energy, burn some fuel to create heat or electricity or warmth or whatever, and it's going to put off a little bit of smoke. There's some byproducts to that process. That's normal. But when it gets out of control, when it becomes unregulated, when it becomes dysfunctional, then the fire expands and it gets much more expanded. The question is, what happens then? Well, at a cellular level, you can see the balanced state there. These are fluorescence-based studies that show at the cellular level the state of nuclear activation going on inside the nucleus, with certain gene expressions happening when there are these fires or this oxidative damage, and the balance is tipped towards stress in the cell. So the question is, again, how does the cell know that it needs to signal for help so that this response happens. Oxidative stress signals a redox communication or redox messaging activity that then calls for a response at the cellular level, at the metabolic level, that provides the neutralizing, stabilizing, and repair abilities that are inherent in every cell. We call that detecting, repairing, or replacing. Even if we have to take the cell out through apoptosis, we're going to remove the cell and divide an adjacent one and replace it with a healthy version of itself. Looking at the biochemistry a little bit more, you can see this sliding scale where there's homeostasis on the left with base reactive oxygen species levels. They're always being created, but it's very balanced and it's very mild production. Over to the right side where there is a severe heightened oxidative stress happening, many reactive oxygen species happening. A little sliding indicator at the top, where on the left side, I have antioxidant defenses, both endogenous and exogenous, at an optimum level that is combating the effects of oxidation. And as antioxidant defenses weaken or become impaired or are dysfunctional, then I don't have the ability to neutralize that environment, and oxidation then begins to dominate. The signaling is happening across the board with these different stages of antioxidant versus oxidation activity. And the redox signaling is what is telling the cell what to do, whether it's going to be returning to homeostasis, whether it's going to remain in a survival defensive mode, or it's going to go towards apoptosis, necrosis, or to become autophagic. This is a continuum. We've broken it down so we can understand it in 3 different parts, but it is a sliding continuum, and I like to think of that as a rheostat. We call it the Redox Rheostat. Wherever on that electrical device at the bottom of the screen, you'll see wherever you slide that, it will electrically determine the amount of current that will be passing on the outside wire. And in a similar fashion, the scale of antioxidant and oxidation levels, this sliding scale goes back and forth. Homeostasis on the left, mild, moderate oxidative state in the middle, or high stress on the right. The 2 molecules primarily, and there's tens of thousands of them obviously, but the 2 that we're going to focus on now are the Nrf2 and the NFKB transcription factors. This is what signals, this does the redox signaling inside the cell. And so you'll see at the bottom, when I'm in homeostasis, I am going to have high energy, high ATP. Cells will proliferate, they'll be happy, they'll be healthy, they'll be in balance. As I start to have mild or moderate oxidative states in the cell, it starts to become a defense response. It's an adaptive response. It's that functional response. And I'm starting now to signal the antioxidant defense mechanisms to come back in. And on the right side, in a more extreme case, I may be actually accomplishing oxidative damage and cell death. And I would just highlight and say, note the relationship between the low stress side and the presence of high ATP energy, and on the right, the high stress side of the equation associated with low redox energy. My prediction is I believe that over the next 10 to 20 years, as biochemistry becomes more adept, as pharmacology, as nutrition, as wellness become more adept at understanding this redox rheostat equation, we're going to see more and more discussion given to what redox energy is and how we can manipulate it in our daily lives. As we back up and we say, well, then what is the effect of all this? Well, the body obviously is the whole organism made up of organs and tissues, and then cells that have cellular processes, metabolic pathways, in which the DNA genetics is key. And for 10, 20 years, especially with the Genome Project coming several years back, all of our focus has been on this genetic paradigm, mapping the genome and understanding it. But what redox does is it takes us one level beneath that to the epigenetic, or the overlay on our genetics. And that is, by definition, the redox signaling, or the effect of redox signaling in terms of its effect on gene expression. So the science of this redox signaling, again, is largely revolving on these two transcription factors. A transcription factor is a protein that, when activated, moves to the nucleus and tells the gene to respond and to express, or to activate, or to suppress itself. The inflammatory side, the oxidative side, the nuclear factor kappa beta transcription factor side, always codes a toxic response that has to do with inflammation and the producing of cytokines and chemokines. In my field of dentistry, for the last 10, 15, 20 years, this has been a major focus topic, is how to deal with this NF-κB cytokine axis that codes for and increases the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines and chemokines that are a part of the innate immune system, and which fire up the body in an acute phase, as well as, if they linger around, then they become chronically present and can produce the accelerated aging, and are a key player in and play a role in the chronic diseases that we see in our societies and around the world. The other side, the Nrf2 transcription factor, is the phase 2 response, and it responds to that low-level oxidative stress. And so when there's low-level reactive oxygen species introduced to or present in the cell, we have it calling for gene expression that signals for the production of glutathione, superoxide dismutase, catalase, and a class of antioxidants that are all intracellular, endogenous antioxidants responding to the change in the oxidative state within the body. That oxidative state can be changed by toxins, by radiation, by hypoxia, or low oxygen levels in the cell, by disease states. And so anything that stresses the body, stresses the cells, is going to be the key thing that activates. And again, this is how the cell knows which way to take the reaction. Looking at a schematic of this, this is the nuclear factor kappa beta transcription factor in the presence of high stress and high levels of reactive oxygen species. Biochemically, the thing that activates NF-κB to move or translocate to the nucleus is the degradation of the kinase inhibitor on the NF-κB molecule. Those are paired, and the kinase inhibitor keeps NF-κB in check. But when it degrades and it becomes activated, it translocates to the nucleus, and it binds with the NF-κB response element, and it produces the cytokines that we referred to earlier. On the other side, looking at the Nrf2 pathway, in homeostasis on the left, there's a molecule called KEAP1, K-E-A-P-1. It's a very cysteine amino acid rich protein. There's 27 cysteine amino acid groups on that, and it's complexed with this Nrf2 in normal homeostasis, balanced oxidative states. However, when oxidative stress shows up, even at low levels, those cysteine residue, those amino acids in the KEAP molecule, are very sensitive to changes in oxidation levels, that positive charge that an oxidized oxidant would possess. And so it becomes it becomes disassociated with Nrf2, which allows it to free up and move to the nucleus, where it complexes with the antioxidant response element there in the ARE. And as it complexes that, it causes gene expression and calls for the production of glutathione, the superoxide dismutase, and the catalase antioxidants that can then come back in and neutralize or rebalance the oxidation in the cell. This is gene expression. When we talk about what is gene expression happens when transcription factors go to the nucleus where the DNA is and either cause gene expression or gene suppression one way or the other. This is the only way that the gene knows how to do that. Now, combining these together and kind of taking it to another level, we see Nrf2 activation. This is really the important one that we want to know how to manage, because this is the solution. We know that there's the mitochondria there in the middle. When it is busy, when it's active, when it's going through its own Krebs cycle electron transport chain activities, it is creating reactive oxygen species. Well, we can take antioxidants, supplements, exogenously, plant-based. We can take those in and they block the effects of reactive oxygen species because they can lend electrons to those oxidant molecules and quiet down their activity. We also have the ability, and I call this biooxidative because we're dealing with the mitochondria. Anything that makes the mitochondria more plentiful, as in it multiplies them, anything that makes the mitochondria more efficient, have greater efficiency in producing ATP and ROS, anything that does that is biooxidative because of its effect on the mitochondria. So this is where healthy diets, herbs, exercise, photobiostimulation, pulsed electromagnetic frequency, low-level laser therapies, magnets, stress reduction, all of those things are healthy because they have a biooxidative effect on the mitochondria, which creates more reactive oxygen species, which in turn creates more redox signaling molecules, which are the molecules of involved in the signaling pathways. I'm going to pause there for just a moment and discuss these redox signaling molecules so you understand where they came from. We have reactive oxygen species created, and basically this is because the mitochondria is taking saline, which is the fluid inside the cell, salt water, and breaking it down just like you would find in an electrolysis chamber in the laboratory. We break down sodium and chloride, hydrogen and oxygen, and they have the ability to recombine into various other molecules, such as ozone, hydrogen peroxide, hypochlorous, singlet oxygen, superoxide, and so forth. Those are the redox signaling molecules that are now created in this ROS mitochondria platform. Now back to our illustration here, these redox signaling molecules that are created from the fractionation of salt water in the cell, then again, as we just mentioned, move to activate Nrf2, which then translocates and it makes the phase 2 antioxidants. We've already discussed the phase 1 inflammation cytokine production, and these phase 2 antioxidants come back and very effectively block the effect of reactive oxygen species in the body. Another way we can provide redox signaling molecules to the body currently is to use redox signaling molecules manufactured in a laboratory using the process of electrolysis that does the same process the mitochondria does in terms of splitting salt water apart into its constituent atoms and recombining them into a variety of different signaling molecules or messengers that are bioidentical with what the mitochondria make and which are native in the body. These redox signaling molecules can be supplied to the body through supplement form to replenish the cell's ability, the body's ability to function and to signal the antioxidant response in the phase 2, where we have glutathione and superoxide dismutase show up in higher levels. It's kind of like having your gas tank in your vehicle run low, and you pull into a gas station to get some petrol to fill up the gas tank, which is it's a good metaphor for life, because as we age, as we are exposed to environmental stress, we become less efficient over time at the mitochondrial cellular level, and even to the point of mitochondrial dysfunction. And as it becomes to dysfunction, we are making less redox signaling molecules. This is why young people are much better able to recover, rebound. Their immune systems are stronger. They can fall down and get back up and recover from injury, as opposed to older people who just slow down. It's been estimated in the literature that our mitochondria lose about 10% efficiency per decade. Obviously, that's 1% a year, so it's very gradual. But a 50, 60, 70-year-old person, even a 30-year-old person, does not have the same healing capacity or immune system strength as, say, does a younger person, maybe at the age of puberty and so forth, all other things being equal. The point here of this is the effect of these redox signaling molecules, whether they are produced by the mitochondria natively through the reactive oxygen species pathway, or whether they are supplied directly via a supplement, or whether we are biooxidatively manipulating them via that mitochondria pathway. The net effect of all of that is that we can directly enhance the Nrf2 activity and thus increase antioxidant expression. So when we think about all the things that we already know from our own experience, we know that exercising and eating right and taking supplement, these are all healthy. The question is why? Because everybody has their own theories. Everybody has their pet or their favorite things they do from a wellness perspective and staying healthy in their body. The question is, well, why do they work? Why does any of them work? Why does all of them work? And the answer is, again, through this process right here of the Nrf2 as opposed to the NFKB pathways, these signaling molecules, and the gene expression which they are able to affect. So looking at the biooxidative, just one more time here. Nutrition, herbs, nutraceuticals, vitamin D, photonic therapy, photobiostimulation, intermittent fasting, low-level laser therapy, something that we often use in dentistry, even hot lasers, nitric oxide vitamins, I'm just going around the list here, chlorine dioxide, hydrogen peroxide, magnetic fields, exercise, ozone therapy, pulsed electromagnetic therapy. The question is, why do they all, or why do any of them work to make us healthy? And the answer is because they affect the mitochondrial activity, which makes more reactive oxygen species, which creates more redox signaling molecules, which activates nuclear factor, or the Nrf2, which is a nuclear factor, and which produces glutathione superoxide dismutase that then comes to the rescue and rebalances the unbalanced oxidative state. Now in dentistry, I'm just going to illustrate this. This is something that every dentist here, loves to see, from a fix-it point of view. This is obviously an extreme example of periodontal disease and tooth decay. But the question is, what's going on there? We know that these bacteria, this one's a Porphyromonas gingivalis, these have endotoxins on their outer coat, which are very difficult to destroy. Our immune system doesn't handle those endotoxins or those lipopolysaccharides very well. So they get in and they provoke an inflammatory response in the cell. The question is how? Well, how they do it, these PAMPs, they're called pathogen-associated molecular patterns. And by the way, there can also be DAMPs, which are damage-associated molecular patterns. That's just a scientific name of something that's going to stimulate my white blood cells, the macrophages, to do something. And they do that through pattern recognition receptors called toll-like receptors on these host cells that activate this NFKB transcription through that oxidative stress mechanism. That then codes for the translation of mRNA, which produces these pro-inflammatory proteins called cytokines that then have their effect both in an acute and in a chronic phase in terms of our cellular and our general health. This is called the receptor ligand pathway because I'm complexing or attaching to a receptor site and triggering or activating a certain response. The second pathway, the second method is the non-receptor. We're not needing toll-like receptors here in order to activate this, and that simply comes through oxidative stress. This is a very important and key thing because For example, we know that sleep apnea is very associated with all of these chronic diseases that are related to inflammation. And the question is, how does not breathing right, how does having increasing and decreasing or intermittent hypoxia, oxygen and carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, how does that invoke inflammation? And this is the pathway. The oxidative stress, when it increases because of hypoxia over and over and over, that activates this NF-κB transcription that goes through the same pathway, producing the inflammatory cytokines that have their effect, tissue damage, as well as throughout the body. The oxidative stress, again, is any shift in any shift of the oxidation level or the redox state, which can be because there's too much oxidation or too little antioxidant protection. One of the things that we also know, this is just way back in the literature, that these redox signaling molecules have, fortunately, a very antibacterial effect. These are the same molecules, these hydrogen peroxide, hypochlorous, ozone, and other radicals that the cells use in an oxidative or respiratory burst, they call it, in terms of phagocytosis of bad cells or bacteria that takes them out. This study showed that when using these redox signaling molecules against these very, very difficult pathogens typical in the body, they were all killed within a minute. And it's a nice broad spectrum microbiocidal material. And so this is an important indicator of the power of redox signaling molecules inside the body as being a part of the immune system to get rid of those bacteria that have those lipopolysaccharides, for example. In regards to the periodontal disease issue as well, since I know we have a lot of dentists that are watching this, we say, what is the impact of this whole discussion on periodontal disease at the tissue and the cellular level for periodontal disease? This is a great study that showed this glutathione and this transcription activity, and it showed the transcription factors such as Nrf2 are redox sensitive. Changes in redox state or the oxidation trigger the nuclear factor kappa beta pathway to produce that tissue damage, and that antioxidants restore the balance, and that antioxidants reduce the reactive oxygen species and restore that balance. This was written in the year 2000. This is really an incredible witness that this science has been around for a very long time, but we're just now, 20 years later, finding out its exact application. Interestingly, in this same article, the concept of a Redox Rheostat was presented, and this was their description or their graphic talking about that. There's your balance again, your oxidation and reductant balance with reactive oxygen species on one side and antioxidants on the other. We could have put oxidants and reductants on either side of that little teeter-totter balance. But when the scale is tipped, where there is more ROS, oxidation, it will point down to the bottom where you have this NF-κB activation. And you can see in the qualitative side of this, again, this is a continuum, it's going to lead to tissue damage, both indirectly through the pro-inflammatory state as well as directly just by the destruction of the cells themselves. If I have more antioxidant activity, then the rheostat flips up to the top, where I have a more reductant-rich oxidative state, or actually the oxidative state is not stressed, and that is where I get cellular repair and replacement and protection, and everything stays nice that way. So as I've highlighted here, oxidative stress has the capacity to activate redox-sensitive signaling pathways in the absence of specific ligand-receptor interaction. This is going on regardless. As we mentioned before, this is happening now, today, in a much better way, in a much more complete way, when we add into this the ability that we can take laboratory-produced redox signaling molecules made from salt water electrochemically And we can supply them to the body and have this function of basically replenishing the cell's ability to perform at optimum levels, as though the mitochondria was a young mitochondria, as though the cell was young and healthy and producing an optimum number of native redox signaling molecules. This has to do with this idea of where does disease come from and what is our role in treating it. Very often we find ourselves in healthcare across all disciplines, up in the canopy of the forest. We're up in the trees. We're in the branches and the higher branches and the twigs and the leaves, and we're looking at the phenotype or the expression of sickness and disease. And we have patients who will complain about this symptom or that symptom, or they'll show up with a sign or a defect. And so most of our approach to this and the way we are trained currently is that we're going to help them manage those signs and symptoms so that they don't impact their life or that they impact them less. And so this whole idea of dealing with wellness really has to go down to the roots. It's like, what is the root cause? What is the cellular health going on at the base of this tree, at the base of that triangle? The epigenetic modulation, if you will, of the DNA will then dictate what kind of expression I'm going to have, or lack of expression that we're going to have. This is another way of talking about activating the inner doctor, I call it. And so when our lifestyles are healthy, when we're eating, when we're sleeping properly, when we reduce our stress and control that cortisol burden that activates inflammation, when our weight is not challenged, when our blood sugars are stable, when we have good blood labs, all of that's happening because this inner doctor, this Redox Rheostat, is active in terms of knowing when it should respond, knowing how to respond to the changing environment that the cells are being subjected to. This is probably should be the title slide, is because when the doctor is in, then I have mitochondrial health. Then I have cellular health. I can do it on my own. This is not to disparage the availability or the need of intervention medicine, we'll call it. What do you do? Obviously, when you fall down and break a bone, you get in an accident, or you do have a heart attack, which is the consequence of many years of inflammatory burden, oxidative burden in your blood vessels. But for some reason, it's caught up with you. You haven't, lived the wellness life to date. What do you do now? And there's obviously hundreds of millions, even billions of people, because everybody with cells, fit the same description. The point is, while in a pure model, we could say if we could start off at age 6 months and live forever with highly active redox signaling working, the effects of life as it would turn out would be very different. This is basically, we're talking about the fountain of youth. We're talking about what I'd prefer to call the fountain of health. When the doctor is in, my cells can heal on their own, and then that canopy of symptoms in the tree begins to go away and begins to be managed better. Now, some time ago, I began putting this together, and this was this was the parallel with my work with the American Academy for Oral Systemic Health, trying to connect the dots, trying to find, because we don't have literature yet, this is too young, this is too new, where we don't have the literature supporting the causative roles of either problems in the mouth, periodontal disease and so forth, and its relationship with systemic disease. We're not to the level where we can show causative action, but we have tens and tens and tens of thousands of articles that talk about the connections, that talk about the linkages, where the preponderance of evidence, whether it's circumstantial or somewhat direct, is so powerful and it's so complete that it empowers the conclusion that there has to be a connection here. So that's why we've titled this Connecting the Dots Between Redox Signaling and Health. You can go to redoxdentistry.com, which is where we really started. and I put a bibliography there that just samples through a number of different, health maladies, a representative sampling of some of the literature. And the challenge would be here, if anyone really wants to dive into the science, if you're kind of the science nerd like me and you've got to know how the electrons move around, you can go into any internet search engine and put in terms such as redox signaling and heart disease, redox signaling and blood sugar, redox signaling and cell dysplasia, or whatever term you want to use. Just put those in and you'll get hundreds and hundreds of return articles listed. And some will be commentary by other people, but a lot of it will be straight out of the government databases of PubMed.gov, where you can read these abstracts in the first person. You can read them yourself and do your own primary research. Doing that, you will be able to see the integral role that redox signaling plays in any and every disease or condition of the body that you wish to learn about. And what you will discover, as I've discovered, is the very foundational role, the very basement level that redox signaling plays, not just in life, but in every disease, condition, and in health. If we get well, whether we are runners or bikers, or whether we are hit the gym, or we eat right, or we're into fasting, we're into gut health, whether we're into cardiac diets, whether we're into devices such as pulsed electromagnetic frequencies or magnet, it doesn't matter what it is. If anything affects the ability to do redox signaling, there's going to be a positive benefit at the cellular level, which means whenever there is wellness or an improvement in health, it had to first come because there was an improvement in redox signaling. And so with this knowledge, we can go back to our respective disciplines, whether it's dentistry or medicine or functional medicine or optometry, chiropractic, physical therapy, doesn't really matter. Inflammation and oxidation run through all of that. And the question is, how do I activate the cell's innate native ability to gene express at a functional responsive level what I need to have expressed in order to maintain homeostasis at the cellular level, where I can maintain healthy, or I can restore health, or I can frankly replace cells as needed so that we can be healthy. So in conclusion, I want to thank everybody for letting me be a part of this. Redox matters, connecting the dots between redox biology and health. This applies to everyone. And the reason I can say that with some authority is because this is about cellular health, and every person on the planet, in fact, every animal on the planet, we all have cells. This is the most basic, operational, functional thing that we can focus on. For those that want to contact me, you're invited to get a hold of me. I have my email address, which is my name, Lee Osler @gmail.com. You can visit us at Redox Dentistry. I have a handout there. It probably needs to be updated just a little bit, but that's what this book will be. This will be the summer of 2021. We'd encourage you to get it. I go through all the science that we've talked about here and 100 times more, as well as some of the practical health applications in a variety of different health issues and conditions that are so common to mankind. You can also reach me on Facebook. We have a Facebook group called Redox Dentistry. You're welcome to join that group and to be a part of or tag along in the discussions in Facebook, or you can send me a Facebook Messenger message. I'll respond to any and all that as I can. Thank you, Bill. This has been a pleasure to present something that has become a passionate part of my life right now, as I recognize, what it really does take to be well regardless.
Excellent presentation, Lee. If you want to unshare your screen, we'll get back to normal vision. You answered the big why everything works, and part of Doctors Uniting is finding the common ground that can help us all. And this information you shared today.
My screen.
Unshare.
Yeah, it has been a pleasure. This has been such a wonderful dip into the science. I never thought that I would enjoy biochemistry this much. And the point here is y'all don't have to be biochemists or to dive into this stuff. You just have to recognize that essential core message of why it matters at the cellular level. I love to know the answer to why, because I accept on faith, I accept on experience that if I go exercise, ride my bike, lift some weights, eat right, have salads, whatever, I lower my cholesterol. I mean, all of those things are going to translate to an outcome. And there are thousands and thousands of gimmicks. There's much that has taken on some degree of Madison Avenue advertising hype, sex appeal. And it's that, what, at the end of them, it makes them all the same to say, none of them work except for redox signaling. And the question is, how effective are they at activating that redox signaling pathway, gene expression, or inhibiting inflammation, and why? How does it work? When you know that answer, it's like suddenly it changes your worldview of what wellness and health is.
Well, you talked about gene expression, and we know that taking the redox signaling molecule as a supplement will activate the genes. How many genes will it activate? I mean, we know of a lot from a study, but what's your estimate of how many genes actually are upticking?
Well, we have a gene study that was produced. If you want that information, you can contact me and I can get you direct information on that. But the gene study was specifically looked at 5 major gene pathway signaling genes. And the researchers made a note that there were hundreds and hundreds of genes, but these were the 5 that they noted. And when supplying, replenishing, I'll say supplemented forms of redox signaling molecules, it had a positive upregulation of between 20 and 31% across a wide assortment of gene pathways, including this Nrf2, serotonin, the vascular growth endothelial factor, the sleep cycles, circadian rhythms. I mean, I could go on and on. All of them were positively affected. And the question there is, if I can positively upregulate genes, not negatively, but positively upregulate gene expression on all of those genes that regulate important body functions, imagine what happens when the cells start functioning the way they should. 20 to 31% is amazing. I mean, I was talking with Dr. Lin once, and he was saying, because he spent 6 years, that was his PhD in pharmacological research. And he says, if we can get a fraction of 1% improvement in some of these cardiovascular arenas, they can birth and market a drug. They can get a heart drug out there based on just little tiny fractions of a percent improvement. Well, here we've got 20 to 31% across the board positive expression in these genes that so impact and are so related to our life. It's very impressive.
There's specific issues and problems people have. What is a doctor to do to share this technology with people?
Well, the interesting thing about this, people say, well, how come this is being marketed the way it is? Well, for 17 years, this was a biotech company looking to create a drug for some very, very, very difficult diseases. I'll refrain from naming them here. You can contact me personally. But these were very monumental diseases. And they thought if we could develop a drug for that, it was going to be an IV drug, because this is a liquid, it's suspended in saline, then we can get a great, we can flip this to a big farm company and they can take it off, and we've made our R&D biotech stuff, and we can go into the next project. And it turns out they couldn't because it's non-toxic. Redox signaling molecules are native to the body and they're not toxic. And so they couldn't provoke any kind of a toxic response in the laboratory that would allow them to get an LD50 or lethal dose, which kills 50% of the lab animals. They had 0. And so they knew they were frustrated. They were not going to get an FDA permit drug classification. And so they were basically, they'd run out of money. And so a guy came in and says, you're really doing this wrong. You need to flip this to the supplement side. This is safe. It doesn't need to go through the hands of physicians or pharmacology companies. Let's just get it out into the marketplace. That that story, understanding that how that genesis happened, that how this made it into the over-the-counter marketplace, and why it is being marketed this way, basically through people telling people or forums such as this. This is the only source. It's a new category of health. This is not a vitamin or a nutrient or a berry or a juice or any other kind of, this is a whole new category because we're actually directly stimulating gene expression that creates the antioxidant response that we talked about. And so to get this, you can contact myself, you can contact Bill, we can give you, the directions of where to go with that. But that's basically how you get it. I have used it within my practice. I've recommended it to patients. This does help. In my experience, again, we're making a disclaimer here that this does not treat, this does not diagnose. This is a supplement. It operates under the FDA supplement rules. And so we don't talk about specific diseases or diagnoses or treatments. But I can tell you that people who utilize this after they've had procedures done in my office and many others' offices heal quicker, faster, with less discomfort, and they're very happy campers. And so it's kind of nice. So you can get a hold of me. Long answer to the short question was you can contact one of us. We can put you in connection with how to get this. And I think we're in 34 countries around the world. This is now being open to. We had to go through basically the FDA department of each of those countries to get them to approve it. And so eventually this will be entirely global, but it's a slow growth process to get the governmental regulators in each country to let it come inside their borders.
I'm familiar with certain practitioners in medicine, naturopaths, physicians both, who will not treat a patient until they have gone through a period of time of being on this particular redox supplementation to kind of weed out all the things that go away from taking it. And then they get down to the baseline of really what's going on they can treat. So it really changed the nature of their practice. So I know this is the baseline thing below the cellular level. It works within the cell, and it truly is the fountain of youth, or as you say, the fountain of health. And it leads us to healthy longevity prescription for each of our patients. I always take it. For 2 years, I've been taking it, and people have been telling me I'm younger looking, I have more energy, I can do more. So, I'm a firm believer in Redox Biochemistry as part of my life. And I want to thank you for sharing with everybody else. Lee, excellent presentation as usual. The 16 years of poor health that we can buy back from that index that you showed, the health span versus the lifespan, this is the ticket to add that 16 years to your life of good health instead of poor health declining until you expire. So thank you very much. And
you're welcome.
Go enjoy your son's graduation from medical school.
Yep, that's today in about 45 minutes. I appreciate being here.
You bet. You guys online here, you can get a link to get CE credit. Look into the comment section wherever you are. You'll find a link and you can get that credit. And I want to promote to you that trimurl.co/global summits. Write that down, go in and join that so that you can get the platform. You can be on the teaching leading edge. Also look up Dr. Lee Osler's book, Redox Matters, coming summer of 2021. We're very close. I'm going to get the second copy, I hope. Thank you guys, and have a good day. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.